She drained my power for 5 straight months, then called me petty when I asked her to stop. That is the short version. The longer version starts with a bright orange extension cord stretched across hard desert dirt like a vein, pulsing money out of my pocket every single night. My name is Cole Bennett. I am 43 years old. I run a small diesel repair shop out on 7 acres just outside Silver Ridge, New Mexico, and until last year I thought I understood my neighbors. Turns out I did not understand this one at all. My property sits at the end of a county road that turns from asphalt to gravel and then from gravel to dust. The land used to be one big ranch back in the 70s, before it got split up and parceled out. There is a shared driveway cutting through the middle like a zipper that never quite closed right. My shop and house are on the left side. On the right side sits a sleek modern build that looks like it was dropped in from Scottsdale by helicopter. My side smells like diesel, hot metal, and coffee that's been sitting on a burner too long. Cinder block walls, corrugated steel roof, oil stains older than some of the guys I hire seasonally. I drive a beat-up Ram 3500 with faded paint and a dented tailgate from backing into my own fence one distracted morning. My idea of landscaping is pushing the tumbleweeds away from the bay doors. Her side looks like a magazine spread. Clean white exterior, black trim, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting desert sunsets. There's a plunge pool that lights up blue at night, decorative gravel arranged in tidy patterns. And in the garage sits a charcoal gray Tesla Model X that always looks freshly detailed. Her name was Madison Clark. 38, former marketing executive from Seattle, moved down here after what she called a reset. She ran an online wellness brand and did private breathwork sessions for people who had more money than direction. The first week she moved in, she brought over a loaf of gluten-free banana bread and said, "We're going to love the quiet out here." I remember thinking she wouldn't last one summer. To be fair, we were cordial at first. She waved. I nodded. We shared the same stretch of gravel, same mailbox cluster at the road, same transformer box that sat between our properties humming quietly like it had secrets. That transformer would end up being the whole story. It was late March when I noticed the cord. I had just finished replacing injectors on a farm truck and stepped outside to stretch my back. The wind was kicking up dust, and there it was, bright orange, industrial gauge, running from the exterior outlet on the side of my shop fence, snaking low along the ground, disappearing under the corner of her garage door. I stood there a minute trying to make sense of it. I unplugged it and held the heavy end in my hand. It was warm. That night, I checked my electric bill. It had jumped $238 compared to the same month last year. I told myself it had to be shop usage. Maybe I'd been running the compressor more. But the next month it was up again. And the next. 5 months total. Roughly $1,200. That is not a rounding error when you run a small operation and margins are tight. The first time I unplugged it, I left a note taped to the cord. Simple. Please do not use my outlet. Call me if you need to discuss utilities. The next morning the cord was plugged back in. There was a laminated card sitting on my workbench. I have no idea how she got inside the shop gate, but she had set it there like a centerpiece. It read, "It is just electricity, Cole. Let's not make this weird. Just electricity." I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so casually dismissive. Electricity is not just electricity when you are the one paying for it. That evening I walked over while she was outside wiping down the Tesla. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "You're pulling power from my outlet." She smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes. "The contractor told me the outdoor line was part of the shared easement." "It's not," I said. "It runs off my panel." She leaned against the car. "It's temporary. I'm waiting on the utility to upgrade my service. This is rural. Things move slow. 5 months slow." She shrugged. "You've got plenty of capacity. It's not like you're hurting." That last line sat with me. It was not about the money anymore. It was about the assumption, the quiet math in her head that decided what I could afford to lose. I told her we needed to figure it out. She told me I was overreacting. We left it at that, but the cord stayed plugged in. For a couple weeks, I went back and forth in my own head. I am not a confrontational guy by nature. I fix engines. I solve mechanical problems. People problems are messy, eh? Part of me wondered if I was being stubborn, if maybe this was the price of living next to someone who came from a different world. But every time I saw that cord, glowing faint under the garage light at night, I felt something tighten in my chest. One Saturday, I drove into town and pulled the original property file from the county clerk's office. The land division documents from 1978 were still on record, scanned, and yellowed at the edges. That is when I learned something Madison clearly had not bothered to. The transformer box servicing both houses was deeded to my parcel. The primary account holder with the rural co-op was me. Her house connected through a distribution line that crossed the shared easement but tied into my infrastructure before reaching the road. In plain English, her lights turned on because my name was on the paperwork. I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot reading the documents twice, then a third time, letting it sink in. She was not borrowing electricity. She was depending on me entirely. That realization did not make me feel powerful. It made me feel responsible. And responsibility cuts both ways. I drove home from the courthouse slower than usual that day, dust trailing behind my truck like a low-hanging cloud, and I kept thinking about something my dad used to say when I was a kid working beside him in his machine shop in Amarillo. If it runs through your hands, it runs through your name. Back then he meant workmanship. If you put something together, your reputation is bolted into it. But sitting there with those county documents on the passenger seat, I realized something else ran through my name now. Her house, her lights, her air conditioning in August, her Tesla charger humming at 48 amps every night like it owned the place. I did not want to fight. I wanted fairness. But fairness sometimes requires leverage, and leverage requires understanding the system better than the person trying to use it. So instead of marching over their waving paperwork, I went back to what I knew best: hardware. On Monday morning, I closed the shop early and drove to an electrical supply warehouse in town, a place that smells like copper and dust and burnt coffee. The guy behind the counter, Luis, has known me for years. He fixes up old Chevys on the weekends. "What are you building?" he asked when I laid the parts on the counter. "Not building," I said. "Managing load." I bought a heavy-duty contactor relay rated for industrial use, a meter lock kit, and a current sensor capable of handling 50 amps continuous. Nothing illegal, nothing destructive, just components. The idea was simple. If her charging load exceeded a certain threshold, the system would temporarily open the circuit. 10 seconds off, then reset. Repeat as needed. I wasn't going to cut her off completely. I was going to make it inconvenient. Because inconvenience gets attention without creating chaos. Back at the shop, I shut down my panel, double-checked every line, and installed the current sensor on the branch feeding her side of the easement connection. I wired the contactor inline and set the trigger at 30 amps. Her Tesla charger pulled 48. That night I sat in my office with the lights off, window cracked open, and waited. Around 9:17 p.m., I heard the faint click from inside the panel. A second later, silence. 10 seconds. Click again. Power restored. From across the property, through the quiet desert air, I could hear the subtle whir of her charger cycling, stopping, restarting. I did not smile, but I did lean back in my chair and let out a long breath I did not realize I had been holding for 5 months. Day 1, nothing happened publicly. No knocking on my door. No text. Just intermittent cycling as the car tried and failed to maintain a steady charge. Day 2 was when the show started. I was under the hood of a backhoe when I heard her garage door open and close 3 times in less than 5 minutes. I wiped my hands and stepped outside casually. She stood there in expensive athleisure, hair tied back, phone in hand, staring at the charger like it had personally betrayed her. Unplug. Plug back in. Blue ring light. Click. Silence. She frowned at the screen. Tried again. Click. Silence. I could almost see the notifications popping up. Charging interrupted. Charging interrupted. She looked around the property as if the desert itself had failed her. That night around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Cole, something's wrong with the power. My charger keeps shutting off. I waited a minute before replying. Panels reading normal on my end. It has to be on your side. This never happened before. That's interesting, I wrote back. No emoji. No explanation. The third day, she walked over in broad daylight. No banana bread this time. She crossed the gravel like she was approaching a podium, yoga mat tucked under her arm, sunglasses pushed up on her head. Are you messing with the power? She asked, skipping hello entirely. I set down the socket wrench I was cleaning and took a rag to my hand slowly. Am I managing my electrical load? I said. Yes. Her jaw tightened. You can't just sabotage my house because you're annoyed. I'm not sabotaging anything. Your house has access to power within the terms of the easement. This is retaliation. No, I said calmly. This is control. She took a step closer. I have clients. I have calls. My vehicle needs to charge. And I have bills, I said. 5 months' worth. She scoffed. We discussed that. No, I said. You dismissed that. There is a difference. I walked into my office and came back with a large manila envelope I had prepared the night before. Inside was a printed breakdown. Itemized. 5 months of increased usage calculated against prior year averages. Total, $1,184.73. A secondary line item referencing misuse of infrastructure under Clause 14 subsection C of the original shared easement agreement. Penalty assessed, $1,800. Attached was a new drafted utility management agreement. From this point forward, cost sharing 60-40. She covers 60% of all infrastructure maintenance and upgrades. I remain primary account holder and final approval authority on high-load installations. Violation results in 72-hour disconnect notice. Term length, 15 years. She flipped through the pages quickly at first, then slower. The color drained from her face in stages, like someone adjusting a dimmer switch. You're joking, she said. I am not. I will get a lawyer. You should, I said. Bring them the deed copy. Bring them the co-op account statement. Bring them the transformer ownership record. Silence hung between us. The desert wind picked up a little, rattling the loose tin on my tool shed roof. She tried a different tone. Softer. Cole, this is extreme. No, I said quietly. 5 months was extreme. There is a moment in any confrontation when both people realize the ground has shifted. I saw it happen behind her eyes. She had assumed I would either give in or blow up. I did neither. Instead, I had moved the chess pieces while she was still playing checkers. She left without another word. That night, the Tesla Charger did its little 10-second dance again, like clockwork. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived. Not from a lawyer. From her. Inside was a cashier's check for $2,984.73. Full back payment plus penalty, rounded up. And the agreement. Signed. Notarized. I stood in my shop holding that paper and felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Relief. Because this was never about humiliating her. It was about boundaries. About the invisible lines people think they can step over when they believe your lifestyle makes you less aware, less educated, less capable. For the next several months, things were quiet. Her charger operated normally within the updated load parameters we agreed on. She paid her share. We nodded again when passing on the driveway. But something had changed. The balance was no longer assumed. 6 months later, I watched a solar installation crew unload panels onto her roof. $30,000 worth of independence glinting in the sun. I guess she decided relying on me was too uncomfortable. Or maybe she learned the same lesson I did. Power is never just electricity. It is leverage. And once you understand where it runs, you never look at a simple orange cord the same way again. When the solar panels went up, I figured that was the end of it. Clean break. Literal and symbolic. For 3 days straight, trucks lined the edge of the gravel driveway. Guys in harnesses moving across her roof like careful ants, bolting down glossy black rectangles that caught the desert sun and threw it back sharper. I watched from my shop door while pretending to organize socket sets that didn't need organizing. Madison didn't look at my side of the property once during the install. Not when the crew tied into her system. Not when the inspector came out. Not even when they flipped whatever switch they flip and her house went from co-op dependent to partially self-powered. That night, for the first time since she moved in, her place hummed differently. A softer tone. Or maybe that was just in my head. I expected her to be smug about it. To make some comment about sustainability or independence or not burdening me anymore. She didn't. Instead, a week later, she walked over with a 6-pack of something local and expensive and stood at the edge of my open bay door like she was stepping into foreign territory. You busy? She asked. Always, I said, but I waved her in any way. She looked around like she'd never really seen the shop before. The weld marks on the floor. The old calendar with a tractor on it. The wall where my dad's photo hangs above the workbench. I didn't realize your dad ran a place like this, she said, nodding at the picture. Ran one better, I said. She set the beer down on a crate. I wanted to say something. I leaned against the bench and waited. I shouldn't have assumed, she said finally. About the electricity. About you. There it was. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just quiet. I shrugged. You did. She gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they're admitting something uncomfortable. Where I used to live, if you plugged into a shared line, nobody noticed. Or they just Venmo'd each other and moved on. This isn't Seattle, I said. No, she said. It's not. We stood there a minute in the smell of oil and metal and desert heat drifting in through the open door. I really did think you were being petty, she added. I didn't understand how the infrastructure worked. That's the thing, I said. Most people don't. They see a switch and assume it's magic. She nodded slowly. There was a version of this story where I stayed angry, where she stayed defensive, where we turned into the kind of neighbors who build fences higher just to avoid eye contact. But that is not what happened. Over the next few months, something shifted again. Not into friendship exactly. More like mutual respect carved out of friction. She started texting before scheduling contractors. Adding a heat pump, load won't exceed agreed threshold. Stuff like that. I'd respond with a thumbs up or a short note about amperage. Once, during a bad monsoon storm, her inverter tripped and half her house went dark. She walked over in the rain this time, not demanding, just asking, "Can you take a look?" I grabbed a flashlight and followed her across the mud. Standing in her garage, water dripping from the edge of the roof, I checked the panel and reset the breaker feeding the backup battery system. When the lights flicked back on, she let out a breath and said, "Thank you." Simple. No edge to it. Later that night, sitting alone in my kitchen, I thought about the first time I saw that orange cord. How quick I was to take it personally. How quick she was to dismiss it. We were both reacting to stories in our heads. In hers, I was the grumpy rural mechanic hoarding resources. In mine, she was the entitled transplant siphoning off what she hadn't built. Neither story was completely fair. But here's the part that still sparks arguments when this comes up at barbecues or when the guys at the feed store bring it up like it's local folklore. Some people think I went too far. They say I could have just sued, or shut her off outright, or, on the flip side, just eaten the cost and kept the peace. Others think I should have never let it get to 5 months before acting. What most of them miss is this wasn't about $1,200. It was about assumption, about what happens when someone decides your work, your name, your infrastructure are background elements in their convenience. When you grow up fixing things with your hands, you understand something fundamental. Nothing runs by accident. Power lines, water pipes, engines, relationships, they all depend on someone maintaining them. And if that someone is you, then you have every right to define the terms. A few weeks ago, almost a year after the whole mess started, I came home late and noticed something different. There was no orange glow from her garage. No extension cords. No cycling hum. Just quiet. The panels on her roof caught the last light of sunset and turned almost purple against the sky. For a second, I wondered if I'd missed the conflict, the sense of control. But I don't. What I keep instead is the lesson. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can enforce boundaries without screaming. And sometimes the most effective response isn't a fight, it's a system. Now I'm curious what you think. Was I justified in installing that load control setup, or did I escalate something that could have been solved with a handshake? Should she have paid without argument the moment I showed her the bill, or was she right to push back? If you were in my position, would you have cut the power entirely or done exactly what I did? Drop your take in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think, and I'm genuinely interested in where people land on this. Because out here, on a split stretch of desert land with one transformer humming between two very different lives, the line between petty and principled isn't always as clear as we like to believe. And sometimes the only way to learn where that line is to watch an orange cord light up the dust.